falsely arrested by a racist property manager, young black law student James Carter's life crumbled. But that moment lit a fire in him. Years later, as a judge, he faced his former oppressor in court. What happened next shocked everyone. Let's start at the beginning. David Clark, a middle-aged white property manager with thinning blonde hair and a perpetual scowl, ruled the residents of the Jackson Heights apartment complex like a petty tyrant. Located in a neighborhood undergoing rapid gentrification, the building housed predominantly black tenants who had lived there for decades. For David, it was more than a job. It was power. He exploited this position mercilessly, issuing exorbitant fines for minor infractions, neglecting basic repairs, and creating arbitrary rules designed to intimidate tenants into submission. Peeling paint and leaking ceilings were ignored, while tenants received threats of eviction for trivial offenses like hanging laundry on balconies. The tenants, already burdened by rising rents and shrinking wages, often felt powerless against his iron grip. But one tenant stood out: James Carter, a 22-year-old black law student with sharp features and an air of quiet confidence. Living in the building since childhood, James had grown weary of the mistreatment and began rallying neighbors, organizing meetings, and researching tenant rights. James's actions didn't go unnoticed. David, whose authority had never been questioned, saw James's efforts as a direct threat to his control. His anger simmered, turning to paranoia as tenants began to support James's initiatives. Determined to crush this resistance, David concocted a scheme. He fabricated a lease violation, claiming James had broken building rules, and served him an illegal eviction notice. When James confronted him, David's fury boiled over. Accusing James of trespassing, David called the police, spinning a tale of theft to ensure swift action. As police officers arrived, James maintained his composure, calmly explaining his situation. But it was futile. He was handcuffed and led away, the sound of his neighbors' murmurs and gasps ringing in his ears. The sight of James's arrest, a young, educated black man humiliated in front of the very community he sought to protect, marked a turning point. Though it crushed his spirit in the moment, it also kindled a fire in James. What began as a small act of resistance became a defining moment in his journey toward justice. James Carter's arrest didn't end in silence. A neighbor, armed with nothing but their smartphone, captured the entire incident: the confrontation with David Clark, the baseless accusations, and James's composed but visibly pained reaction as he was handcuffed and led away. The footage, shared online, quickly went viral. Headlines soon read, "Black law student arrested over false accusations by property manager." The public outcry was swift, igniting conversations about racial bias, housing inequality, and abuse of power. Among those moved by the footage was a small but dedicated advocacy group specializing in tenant rights and racial justice. Reaching out to James, they provided not only legal counsel, but also a network of emotional and financial support. Their encouragement helped James file a lawsuit against David for wrongful eviction and defamation. It wasn't just about seeking justice for himself. James wanted to shine a light on the systemic issues plaguing his community. Simultaneously, James threw himself into his law studies with renewed vigor. His coursework, once a step toward a stable career, became a means of dismantling the structures that allowed people like David to thrive unchecked. Late nights, once spent studying case law for exams, were now split between preparing his own legal case and meeting with tenants who had their own horror stories of David's oppressive practices. David Clark, however, remained steadfast in his arrogance. Confident his wealth and connections could shield him, He hired a team of high-profile lawyers. They set to work smearing James's reputation, painting him as a troublemaker and opportunist. But the narrative began to unravel when more tenants, emboldened by James's courage, came forward with evidence of David's exploitative behavior. Maintenance logs, retaliatory fines, and a history of wrongful evictions painted a damning picture. As the lawsuit gained traction, it exposed not only David's misconduct, but also systemic patterns of discrimination in housing. Media coverage expanded, revealing a justice system that often failed to protect marginalized communities. Public opinion began to shift, and for the first time, David's position seemed precarious, while James emerged as a symbol of resilience and determination. James Carter's journey through law school was marked by perseverance and purpose. Despite the weight of his lawsuit against David Clark dragging on for years, mired in legal delays and procedural maneuvers, James never lost sight of his goal. He graduated at the top of his class, earning accolades not only for his academic brilliance, but also for his tireless advocacy on behalf of tenant rights. His personal experience with the flaws in the legal system shaped his vision. The law wasn't just a tool for justice, but a weapon to dismantle systemic inequities. After passing the bar, James immediately immersed himself in civil rights work. Joining a prominent legal organization, he began taking on cases involving housing discrimination, police brutality, and workplace inequity. His fiery courtroom presence, combined with a deep understanding of the law, quickly earned him a reputation as a formidable advocate for marginalized communities. For James, every case was a step toward creating the kind of change that could prevent others from enduring the injustices he had faced. Meanwhile, David Clark's once solid foundation began to crumble. The attention brought by James's lawsuit spurred broader scrutiny of his property management practices. Local government agencies opened investigations, uncovering years of fraudulent activities, from falsified maintenance reports to illegal rent hikes. Former tenants, inspired by James's courage, came forward in droves, providing testimony that painted David as a man who thrived on exploitation and fear. As David's reputation plummeted, so did his business. Potential tenants avoided his properties. Protests outside his office became a regular occurrence, and financial backers began pulling their support. Legal troubles compounded. A tax fraud case, whistleblower claims from former employees, and a class action lawsuit from evicted tenants all closed in on him simultaneously. By the time James was making headlines for securing a major settlement for tenants. In another case, David was desperately attempting to salvage what little remained of his empire. His once confident demeanor now masked a man grappling with the fallout of years of unchecked greed. While James's star rose, David became a cautionary tale, a symbol of how systemic injustice could be fought and defeated. Years after his fight for justice began, James Carter reached the pinnacle of his career when he was appointed as a judge in a prestigious district court. Known for his unwavering dedication to fairness and equity, Judge Carter had become a symbol of hope for marginalized communities and a voice for reform within the legal system. His courtroom was a place where the law served as a shield for the vulnerable and a sword against corruption. Meanwhile, David Clark's life had spiraled into despair. His property management empire, once a fortress of control, lay in ruins. Investigations into his shady practices had uncovered years of tax fraud, embezzlement, and unethical dealings. With mounting legal troubles and no allies left, David was arrested and faced trial for his crimes. Financially ruined and socially ostracized, he was a shadow of the man who once wielded power over others. In a remarkable twist of fate, David's case was assigned to none other than Judge James Carter. When David entered the courtroom for the first time and saw the man he had once tried to destroy sitting at the bench, his face paled. For James, the moment was poignant, but not vindictive. He approached the case as he would any other, with impartiality and a steadfast commitment to justice. As the trial unfolded, evidence against David painted a grim picture of greed and exploitation. Witness after witness testified about the lives upended by his actions, from families evicted without cause to tenants driven into financial ruin. David, once defiant, sat silently, forced to confront the devastation he had caused. Judge Carter, maintaining his professionalism, ensured that the trial adhered strictly to the law. His rulings were fair and measured, leaving no room for accusations of bias. When the guilty verdict was finally delivered, it was not just a condemnation of David, but a symbol of a larger reckoning with systemic injustice. As David was led away in handcuffs, Judge Carter remained composed. The moment was not about personal triumph, but the triumph of justice. It was a testament to how far James had come, and a reminder of the transformative power of perseverance and principle.